Shut up and sit down.
By all means, go for it. Have fun. Just leave me alone.
People are coming together more and more and more and more as the government has been failing us more and more.
I'm against being shitty to people.
You can't research your way into understanding somebody.
One way or another, I'd rather have the fight now.
What's up, fighters? Welcome back to the show. We've got an awesome show for you guys this week. I'm excited for it. We're talking to a lifelong friend and co-founder of the Practice Labs, Jonathan Mahan. But first, we've got a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you guys by the Blood of Tyrants wine. You guys can get yourself a bottle of this elegant Cabernet and support the revolution at the same time by using promo code F4L. It'll get you $5 off your first order. Go check them out. Awesome company. Yeah, they're a new sponsor, so I'm pretty excited about this. But without further ado, the Practice Lab is taking over the approach to training salespeople, and here to break it down, their co-founder and childhood friend of mine, Mr. Jonathan Mahan. How's it going?
Hey, good to be talking with you again, David.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, right? About, I don't know, but not quite a year yet. Close to that, though. Time flies.
Yeah. So let's just start out with where did the idea for the Practice Labs come from?
Yeah. So I started a new sales job, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something. And as I was onboarding with that company, I would watch training videos in the morning. That was part of the onboarding. And they were really good training videos. And they were teaching us about the right sales practices and good questions to ask and a good process to follow and all sorts of stuff that really I agreed with and that I'd seen work in the past. And then I'd have my lunch. And then in the afternoon, I'd go take a walk. And I would listen to recordings of my peers' calls on my phone through the Gong app. And it was really interesting for me because I would listen to these recordings of my peers and basically nothing we were being trained on was actually showing up in real sales calls. And I'm sitting there scratching my head going, wait a minute, they got the same training I did on what good questions are. Why aren't they asking any of them, right? They know what the sales process is. Why aren't they following it? They know how to handle these objections. Why are they not handling them that way? And it was this great reminder for me that there's a really big gap between intellectually understanding a behavior and knowing what good selling looks like and actually having the linguistic, intellectual, the neurological brain skills needed to actually pull that off in a real sales conversation when the stakes are high, when there's a lot of emotions, when you don't have time to think and prepare your response, you just got to go at real speed.
Mm-hmm.
So that gap kind of stood out to me. And of course, right, I'm a very avid reader and listener of podcasts and stuff. And I can, talk for days on sales theory. But when you look at my sales calls, there is a pretty big gap between what I know and what I'm able to pull off in reality. So wonderfully, I guess serendipitously, at the same time that this was happening during my day, in the evenings, I was listening to a book called Peak and later a book called The Talent Code. And both of those books were written by researchers who spent decades studying top performers across a variety of disciplines and figuring out how do the top of any industry become the very best, right? So they're looking at athletes and actors and comedians and chess players and all these folks. And of course, in all those industries, that gap between intellectually understanding and being able to pull it off in a performance is well understood. And the way every other discipline closes that gap is through focused, deliberate practice. And specifically what that means is taking the whole performance, breaking it down into its component parts, and practicing each part individually, where you're focusing each repetition on what's one thing you can do better and making note of, why you're making the decisions you're making and how to do it better. And you keep doing that until that piece of the performance becomes second nature to you. And then come performance time, you can execute beautifully on these behaviors because you spent so much time in advance practicing and refining these skills.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking to myself, okay, so why aren't we doing that in sales, right? Why are we the only industry that's just like, practice? What's that? Just got to pay the speaker 10 grand to come tell us what good selling looks like, and that's all that's needed. Then our sales team can go execute on good selling. So I realized for myself, if I was going to become the kind of salesperson I wanted to be, if I was going to close that gap for myself between what I knew and what I could actually do, I needed practice and I needed people to practice with. So the very seed of this is literally I just sent like some messages on Slack to my colleagues saying, hey, do you want to like practice on Thursday afternoons? And we just started doing it. And I would kind of come up with exercises
Nice.
each week of things we could practice, whether that was responding to objections or opening calls or talking about pricing or comparing ourselves to competition, just like these key moments, in the sales conversation where I felt kind of rusty. We would spend time in practice, and I really loved it, and I benefited from it a ton, and as did they, and we all saw our skills, increase rapidly. In fact, we were like the fastest ramping group of new hires the company had ever had. And I decided to start taking this to the public as well, and started inviting folks from our LinkedIn network to come do these practice sessions. And that's when I actually reached out to my co-founder, who is a sales trainer. Her name's Jordana Zeldin, and she had a little bit of experience as well with taking a practice-based approach to sales training. So I asked her if she wanted to run the sessions with me, and she started doing that. And she's really been the one who's had like the business mind for recognizing that these cool sessions we're doing could actually become a business. And over the last 18 months, we've kind of been iterating and adjusting and growing and basically using what other disciplines are doing as our guide as we go to figure out how do you help salespeople increase their skills using the same kind of patterns and approaches that for decades, even centuries, have been proven to work in other disciplines.
Yeah, it's crazy that you're articulating that difference between like knowing it and being able to do it. Because for most of my sales career, I've just told myself and everybody that I'm just better as a trainer because like I know the stuff and I'm really good at teaching it. And it is a skill that I've honed over my adult life is how to teach well. And so I've always just leaned into as quickly as I possibly can into like some sort of a managerial role at almost every sales company I've been in. So I spend a lot of my time training and less as little time as possible actually doing the selling because I'm not that great at it. Almost every person I have ever trained in sales outperforms me within a few months of them being done with me training them. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, and I've always just kind of been okay with that. But what you're articulating here is that it's a lot more normal of a problem than just me and myself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say there's a universal component, right? Which again, everyone has a gap between knowing and doing, and everyone can close that gap through practice. So I would argue that if you had the interest in it, you could apply yourself to doing a lot of focused, deliberate practice, and you could close that gap and you could start becoming as good as the folks you've trained. There's another component too, where I don't know how much of this. I guess it can be changed, but maybe not quite as easily. And again, maybe there's no need to change it. I have identified that to become truly great at anything, there's really two ways to do it. Although truthfully, the best among us need to be able to do both. And one aspect of that performance is the unconscious competency, where you don't even know what you're doing, you don't know why you're doing it, but your gut just tells you this is the right thing to do right now, right? It's the hockey player on the ice who just has this knack for always going where the puck is. And if you ask him afterwards why he went there, he's like, I don't know. It just kind of felt like that was the place to be. Something in their unconscious brain is pretty good at running these calculations, but they don't know what's going on. Well, you see this a lot in sales, right? Especially a lot of salespeople. Their answer to everything is, I don't know. It's kind of a case by case basis. And when someone gives you that answer for every question about how should you handle this, you realize this person has lots of unconscious skill or unconscious talent, but they don't really understand what's going on. They don't understand why they're doing it. They just know their gut tells them in this situation, I should be firm. In this situation, I should give a little bit more. But again, they don't know the underlying patterns and markers to identify which is which. So that's one way to be great, is to be unconscious competent. And the other way to be great is to be consciously competent, where you understand everything you're doing and you understand why you're doing it. You understand why things happen the way they happen. You understand the patterns behind them and can explain them and teach them. So I really think the true best, right? The greatest of all time, whether you're looking at athletes or music, they need to have both. They need to have the understanding and the unconscious skill. Of course, if you have neither, you're not going to do well. But most of us are going to kind of have one or the other, and you can make a good living in sales either way. And I've always been much more of the conscious competency. I understand the heck out of this stuff. but I'm actually, I would say, maybe a little above average at execution. I used to be below average at execution because of all my practice. I'm probably above average at execution, but I'm definitely a 9 out of 10 on understanding and maybe a 7 out of 10 on execution. So it sounds like for yourself, right, that exists as well, where you have lots of conscious competency and awareness, so you're a great trainer, but maybe your unconscious competency is pretty weak, which is why your numbers aren't that great.
Yeah. I definitely think doing this show has helped with the unconscious competency of just talking to people, of like you were saying, of like knowing when to give and when to be firm is something I didn't even think about having to think about when it came to doing a podcast. I'm like, oh, I'm just talking to friends about stuff that we agree on or have similar viewpoints on for the most part. I shouldn't need to know when to bite my tongue or when to challenge somebody on something, but that's come up a lot on this. And it's I think just doing this and talking to people as much as I have been with the podcast in the time that I've been off of sales calls, doing politics work, it's definitely helped me at least like kind of keep some of those people skills and the conversation skills. But this is so much more structured, and like you agreed to come on to this show. I'm not cold calling you right now and bugging you in the middle of your day, so it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. Well, so talking about the roots of the practice lab actually and our previous interactions. So one thing that I identified is that I became a heck of a lot better at like those opening calls, right? The first call in a sales engagement, I usually refer to it as the discovery call, right? Where you're only talking about the product a little bit, you're mostly asking them questions about their world, their needs, their pain points. I became a hell of a lot better at those calls pretty soon after I started hosting a podcast. Because even though my podcast had nothing to do with sales, neurologically, linguistically, there's a lot of the same skills being used, right? Of forming questions in a way that makes them spark interesting conversation instead of asking questions that just, fall flat on their face. There's even this tension I've noticed when you're hosting a show, at least for me, the way I would do it is I would have a rough idea of where I wanted to go, what topics I wanted to cover, where I wanted to end up. So I needed to kind of have that arc in mind. I needed to have kind of the discipline to guide the conversation where I had to go. But simultaneously, I had to be flexible and adaptive to the guest and talk about what they wanted to talk about and go down the rabbit trail sometimes they wanted to go down. So it was this interesting tension of like, I kind of want to maintain direction and focus and hit our bullet points, but I also want this to be an interesting conversation and talk about the most, what they have to offer. And knowing when to abandon the script and totally ad lib and when to stick to it, that's difficult to do. And again, that's just a mental skill that you need to learn as a podcast host that, oh, by the way, is like the same skill you need to learn as a sales rep running these calls. So that also kind of pushed me down the path of practice when I realized that, hey, wait a minute, I can become a better salesperson by literally just investing in the hardware that is my brain, right? If I can have a brain that thinks more quickly, if I can have a brain that is better at memory, a brain that's better at managing my emotions, better at listening and being curious, if I can just upgrade this hardware that I have, I can become a better seller. And in fact, a lot of what we do in the practice lab has absolutely nothing to do with selling. We'll spend whole weeks doing exercises that have nothing to do with selling. We just train the brain on how to be more curious. We train people on different ways of listening and how the way you listen can actually impact the speaker, right? And make them want to divulge more or divulge less, right? We train people on just how to ask questions in a way that, again, opens up people's minds. It gets them talking and thinking new thoughts compared to asking questions that fall flat on their face and lead the conversation nowhere. And all of those skills are just universal human skills. That's nothing to do with selling. So we'll actually practice those skills outside the context of sales because there's no need to bring context in or to bring sales into the context to practice skills of curiosity and listening and empathy. So that's basically where I learned that lesson, was from being a podcast host and tying it back to our previous engagements. Probably the show that helped me with this the most was the Courageous Conversations podcast, because again, I had to do a lot of managing my emotions when I was faced with perspectives that I found truly appalling and people who disagreed with me. And I had to do a lot of thinking of how to word my questions so as to, make sure they land right and have the right impact. And that was the show that I had you on, I don't know, a year and a half ago, which is probably the first time we did one of these live sessions. So it all kind of ties together. That Courageous Conversations podcast is definitely part of why I did the practice lab and the way I did it in the way that I did.
Yeah, you brought up a good point of the similarity between like a sales script and like the questions I have in front of me right now. Because I've had plenty of shows where I have a whole page full of questions, and I asked one of them in an hour and a half show. I got to the first question, and sometimes it's because we just got into a great conversation. Other times it's because the my guest kind of like took over and monologued for the first 25 minutes of the show. But even those are the ones with gigantic monologues in it are also pretty awesome, and I'm happy that I did them and I got to places with people that not a lot of people get to, and talking about kind of completely off topic stuff. I think probably one of my favorites is I had a real anti-war activist, Scott Horton, on that spent probably like 15 minutes talking about like getting stoned and going skating with his friends when he was a teenager and a young adult. And just like a completely off topic, nothing I intended on talking about, but just like I got multiple comments about like, wow, it was really cool to kind of see that side of him. And all I did was shut up and listen and let him rant for literally almost 35 minutes straight at the beginning of the show. I asked a question and did not talk until almost 40 minutes in. It's great. But same with the sales script, like the one that I just wrote for my new company and for my sales team has about like 8 or 9 questions that you need the answers from the people so that we know like where we're taking this deal. And the first thing I said to my team was, you're almost never going to get these answered in the same order. Do not try to ask them in the same order every time, and do not force them into bullet point questions. Ask them questions that can be the answer, that they can answer multiple of these questions with one question from yourself. So like how big is your business is you don't just say how big is your business, then they'll say, oh, we have like 6 people, and then you have to ask another one and another one and another one. Instead, you can definitely formulate that in a way where they might monologue for 10 minutes and you answered most of your questions you need to. You understand a lot about their business that way. So yeah, it's a lot of just like rolling with the punches is a big part of sales for sure.
Yeah. But again, simultaneously maintain this balance of you have certain things you got to get to. You can't just let because you'll have customers sometimes that'll just take the conversation on these ridiculous tangents and talk about irrelevant stuff. And you're like, well, that was a waste of a call. Nobody learned anything important. So it's this
Yeah.
balancing act of like, I kind of need to maintain control of the call, but I also kind of need to let go of control of the call.
Mhm.
Kind of need to be flexible in some cases, but also have to, be disciplined in other cases. And again, you can learn those skills outside the context of sales. Podcast
Mhm.
host is probably the best way to learn those skills.
Yeah. So what is it like having pretty much the entirety of your clientele being salespeople and having to sell to people that sell for a living?
I actually have sold to salespeople for much of my career, and I actually prefer it. Um, I, I think salespeople appreciate good selling even more than other folks do because they know how hard it is and they recognize, maybe gaps in their themselves. So, when I'm meeting with a seller talking about the program, I ask them a good question to get them to talk about the value of joining a program like this. Very often I'll get this nod of like, oh, that's a really good question. You're good at this, aren't you? And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, game recognizes game. And I actually find that adds a fun dimension to things. And I think it does help establish, credibility if I'm selling well. Because again, from the moment, it's not lost on them, right? It's not lost on them what I'm
Mhm.
doing, and they appreciate and recognize it. You know, um, I guess I imagine if you're someone who sells wine and you sell wine to folks who themselves, make their own wine, right? They'll take a sample and they'll recognize what's going on and they'll appreciate what you did with this wine to make it taste so good. Whereas if you sell
Mhm.
it to someone in the Walmart parking lot, they'll be like, oh, I don't know, this tastes pretty good. I like it. And they won't really understand what's behind it. So I like selling to salespeople, personally. And again, I always, whenever possible, do I guess, I don't know, make a game out of it, you could say, by when they recognize what I'm doing, I'll acknowledge it, or I'll even highlight what I'm doing here as well. So
Yeah.
I like it.
I definitely prefer like business to business selling versus like B2C kind of selling. People most of what I've done in my sales experience has been somewhere in the financial realm of some sort. And so I'm talking about numbers and money to people that deal with numbers and money most of the time. And it's a lot easier than like when I used to sell suits to people that were like going to a funeral and buying a suit that they don't really care about. And they're probably never going to wear again. And they know nothing about suits and they're just here to do the thing that their wife told them to do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have a whole lot of fun with that. I'm not going to be able to upsell them really. I'm not going to really be able to prey on like, oh, this looks great or that looks great. Like, they don't care. They just want a black suit. They should have gone to Walmart, but they came to someplace way too nice. And so I definitely prefer it being a lot more logically based when it comes to the selling. I know all selling is emotional, but for me, I find it a lot easier when I'm able to still give them at least one or two hard numbers that they can just compete with the people around me and see that I'm the person offering them the best deal at the end of the day. And if I'm not the one offering them the best deal, I kind of don't want their business, because if they can get a loan or a product better and cheaper somewhere else, then they should do that for the sake of their business. And I've never really been that pushy of a salesperson in that way. So
Yeah.
I guess that kind of just gives me an easy out too. If it's just like, okay, they beat me. Cool.
Yeah.
Come talk to me next time you need something.
Yeah.
How is it selling a service or compared to selling more of like a product or a commodity?
I will say it is interesting. I've spent most of my sales career selling products. So when it comes time to like educate people, it's a slightly different motion, right? There's not like a demo so much as it's like, all right, well,
Mhm.
let's just keep talking about what we offer. So that makes it a little bit different. Um, Even like finding ways for people to sample it is a bit challenging too sometimes, because like, without being in the cohort, how do you really experience it? It's just difficult to find something that we can pull out of this community and share with the world that actually gives them an accurate reflection of what we're all about. I would say too, this isn't a huge concern, but it's something we always keep our eyes on too, is the question of like, how much of your, secret sauce, intellectual property do you share, and how much do you hold close to the vest, right?
Mhm.
When people say, oh, what's your curriculum? Do we share everything? Because at that point, someone could just take that and be like, this is great. I'm going to go make my own practice lab, right?
Right.
So we don't worry too much about that, but that is another just aspect to think about. When it's a product, you can give people demos, you can give people free trials, you can give people as much access as they want because it's a product. Either they buy it or they don't. But when you're a lot of what you're selling is ideas and concepts, you got to be careful you don't share too much, right? Because again,
Yeah.
if I shared with you the details of every single exercise in our program, you'd feel confident buying it, but you'd also feel confident just running those sessions in house without us. you
Yeah.
know, so again, we don't worry too much about that. Truthfully, the execution is really difficult, even if you're holding the blueprints. But yeah, that's one thing again about selling a service and selling ideas and concepts that I just haven't had to run into before.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the biggest struggles for me when I switched into politics as a full-time career. I'm very used to selling. I had been doing it for pretty much 5 years full time when I went into politics. So the idea of stopping somebody on the street and selling them a candidate seemed like a no-brainer to me. But there wasn't I just I struggled with the close because there really isn't one.
Yeah,
Because
right.
you can get unclosed very easily. Like when you're selling a product, they have to like come back, look you in the eyes and say, "I don't want this anymore. Please give me my money back." Where with an idea, you can very easily just discard it and believe something else. You don't
Yeah.
have to go back to like your childhood pastor and say, "Oh, I'm not a Christian anymore." Like that's
Yeah.
not a thing you have to do. So I found like that feeling confident that I had actually finished the conversation and closed them on this idea kind of selling was very difficult for me. And one of the reasons why I, again, kind of moved myself into a more managerial role and was a field director instead of actually like on the ground a lot of times. Uh, So yeah, I personally struggle a lot without having like a hardcore something to say, look it, shiny, buy it.
Yeah. Right.
So you talked a little bit about how you like met and started working with your co-founder. How did the conversation of we're now going to be co-founders of a thing instead of just cooperating on a project? Lose me.
Seems like there's a little bit of an audio lag, but I think I got it. So on the conversation with the co-founder, it was very gradual, right? So the first message was, "Hey Jordana, I'm doing this thing. Here's what it is. I know you have a background with practice and sales training. Do you want to co-host this with me as a way to kind of increase, your visibility and reputation in the sales community?" And it was like, "Sure, why not? Let's try it out." So I already had a lot of like materials and curriculum built out that I had kind of been running internally with my colleagues and teammates. So it was like, okay, well we can just use the same material and you'll just help co-host with me. Um, and that's how it started. And then after a few weeks, she was the one who's like, "We should probably just charge people for this, right? Like this is just so massively valuable. Why don't we just start charging people?" And I would say like most folks, we started off really small. We're like, what if we charge people like $20 a month or $50 a month, right? Just to like attend these sessions. And that was kind of the plan going forward. And then we did like kind of an official beta test where we sent a group of, I don't know, like 20 sellers through a 6-week cohort. And man, the rave reviews people were giving on the back end was just this great confirmation that yes, we were onto something. And then we're like, oh, well, this is fantastic. We should charge more for this then, make it substantial, side income, side hustle income for us. So we started developing the curriculum more and put it together. And we actually spent so much time focused on just building the curriculum out. We actually didn't do any like business development. And we were like, oh, shoot, we got to get people to pay for this. So we actually decided for our second cohort to make it another test cohort for free and let folks join the program for free, except this time it was a 12-week long experience instead of a 6-week experience. But like even at that point, it was still like side hustle income. Maybe the idea that maybe in a few years we'll sell this side hustle to someone and make some money off the sale of the business. But we were both very much still working our full-time jobs and didn't plan on making that change anytime soon. And then after that second cohort, that was a 12-week program, and folks started really giving us great feedback on how impactful it was and how different it was and how their selling was changing. That's when Jordana was like, this might be able to become a main hustle. Like the problem we're solving for people, closing the gap between what salespeople know and what salespeople can do, is a really big freaking problem that costs companies lots and lots of money. And the industry that we're kind of falling under of just general sales training is an industry that spends $20 billion a year, right? Like there's money out there to be spent. We solve a problem better than anyone else solves a problem. Once the problem is solved, there's immediate impact on revenue for the business. Like, why couldn't we just make this our main hustle? So it was probably, I don't know, beginning of this year that it kind of became apparent that we had a winning horse here, that if we invested the time, energy, and effort into it, this could be a business that sustained both of us easily. And we've kind of been working towards that ever since. And it's only been recently that my co-founder Jordana actually wrapped up her sales training business and is focusing full time on the practice lab. I still have a day job. Hopefully, sooner rather than later, I'm able to make the leap too and do that full time. We'll see how that goes. But it was a gradual thing. It started off as something that we were just going to do to increase our brand and exposure and reputation in the sales community. And then it was like side hustle income. And then it was like maybe sell the company one day. And then it was like, oh, wow, we could just do this. This could be our jobs. So still not there yet, but well on our way.
There you go. And back to our earlier point of not following the script and coming back to it naturally, one of my next questions was how to kind of make that decision of when being self-employed and building something is the right move for you instead of it being a side hustle. So you already answered my question.
It's the question I ask myself all the time. I don't really know the answer to it. Obviously, there are practical real world considerations. So we're a single income household, so it's just me, and cost of living is high where we are, so it's not like we can get by on just a little bit of money. We need to have a pretty substantial income to be able to pay our bills. So, and we don't have, a savings built up that's, all that spectacular. And I'm generally pretty pretty risk averse when it comes to finances, right? I know some people in my situation would have already quit their day jobs and been like, don't care that there's not revenue lined up. This is a winning horse. I believe in myself. We have something valuable. Just give me 30 to 60 days. People will pay me for it, right? Um, uh, I don't quite have the stomach for that. My co-founder Jordana has a lot more stomach for that, right? Again, she wrapped up her coaching business when we had only brought in like $10,000 in the entire history of our company. And it was like, that seems kind of early, So she's more bold than I am. So she took the leap first. It's been fantastic now that she has taken the leap. We've really been able to accelerate things, right, and get things moving a lot faster. And I'm sure once I take the leap, it'll speed up too. So I wish I had a better answer, but it's one I'm still pondering. I think, in most situations, you should quit before you've replaced your full-time income. But as far as like just how soon, I don't know. I'm probably going to end up quitting my day job when we're like halfway there, right? Halfway to making enough money to pay both of our salaries. Then it's like, okay, maybe I got 60 days savings and a hell of a lot of audacity. We can probably close that gap between now and then. But yeah, I don't know. I've been asking all sorts of folks in my network, who have made the leap themselves. And some folks were like, oh, dude, it was the best thing I ever did. The business fell flat on its face after 9 months, but it was still the best thing I ever did. And I'm in a such better place because of it. And other people were like, yeah, I quit too early. I should have kept my day job longer. It made it unnecessarily difficult and painful for me. So the advice I'm getting is across the board. And I think the advice I'm giving right now might not be the most actionable. Just a personal decision, right?
Yeah, I know that especially our generation got told the like you can do anything you set your mind to kind of mantra a lot in our adolescence, and it's given way to a very cocky mentality, especially in this area. I feel like I'm probably a little bit more like your co-founder. I've done that leap twice now. Way too early both times. Ended up like moving back in with my parents because of it both times. Big mistakes. But like you were talking, some of your friends were saying that even though the business fell flat on the face, I feel like I don't super regret those decisions. It definitely gave me experiences that I wouldn't trade for the world. But yeah, it's a hard line to really walk into to know how to maneuver it. I usually just think back to the Ron Swanson quote of "Never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing."
Yeah.
And like you were saying, I think I agree that quitting before you've gotten to that fully replacing your income is probably the best move, because eventually you're going to end up half-assing two things, and you're probably going to get fired from your day job instead of choosing when you quit, and your business is not going to be growing the way that you wanted it to be. So
I've had that thought plenty of times before, and it's not over yet. That could be my story. Because yes, despite my best efforts, there's no denying the quality of my work goes down the more invested I get in this side hustle, right? Doesn't matter how disciplined I am at maintaining time boundaries and stuff. It's like my heart's just not in it. Like when all of your heart and passion and purpose and desire and drive is tied up in one project, and you have a fucking boring as shit day job that you got to do. You just can't willpower yourself to deliver the same kind of performance you used to deliver when you actually found this interesting, and this is where your ambition was tied up. So yeah, it's always a risk when you got that side hustle that your employer will ask you to leave before you decide to leave. And
I'm
who
sure
knows?
going on the internet and saying I'm going to quit my day job as quickly as possible isn't helpful to that. But
All right, hopefully none of my bosses are watching this live stream going like, that son of a bitch, I knew his quality of work was suffering. I knew it. I could see it all over those reports.
Do your current employers know about the practice lab and the fact that you're doing this, or are you kind of like trying to keep it under wraps for now, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, no, so they know about it, and they've been actually very supportive from the beginning. So, I mean, the whole thing started within my current employer, right? At least in its like earliest conceptual form. Obviously, we've very much changed the product since then, but my managers and leaders knew about what I was doing internally with my colleagues. And then when I started offering it externally, I let them know I was offering it externally too. Not to mention they connect with me on LinkedIn, so they see it there. And just as I've continued to grow the business, they've kept hearing about it. They're aware of it. We've even had conversations about ways that possibly the practice lab could support my employer, right? And they could become one of my customers. So yes, they know about it. Yes, they're supportive. I don't think I possibly could have hid it from them, I guess, especially with me being all over LinkedIn and using that as kind of a primary growth engine.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes it a little bit more difficult. I've taken so much time off of LinkedIn. I just started going back on there regularly as I got back into the finance world, and I've kind of missed it. I like LinkedIn. It seems so much cleaner than the other social medias. It's like everybody's nice for the most part. Everybody's trying to like build something or work on something. Even if they're talking out of their ass and not actually accomplishing anything, they're still pretending to be accomplishing something. Whereas like Facebook and Twitter is just bogged down with the unambitious people that just want to hate on everything that's going on. So I don't know. It's been refreshing being over on LinkedIn and just like all of these positive comments and like helpful sales things and memes that are applicable to your boring day job. Like you said, it's nice. I kind of like it.
Yeah, it's been my social media platform of choice. I don't know, since 2019 maybe, and that's really the only social media platform I use right now. In fact, I probably could benefit by diversifying a little bit, but as of right now, all my eggs are in the LinkedIn basket, so to speak.
Yeah. I made the mistake of doing that with Twitter, and that's where I'm at right now. And most of my following is there, and I hate it. It's a cesspool. I'm not even streaming on Twitter right now. I went down to just 3 locations on my StreamYard account and just stuck with Facebook, YouTube, and Odyssey because that's where the actually good content goes.
Yeah.
So give us like a kind of elevator pitch rundown of exactly what you guys do at the practice lab and what you guys offer.
Yeah. So right now, we have two, I don't know, flavors of offering. One is like a cohort-based program where folks from a variety of companies will come to us and be part of a community for, a period of time. Then we also have a model where we can just take our offerings directly to businesses and they can, pay us a set price to run a workshop and exercise with their team. The one that we've been doing the longest that I'll speak on is that cohort-based approach where sellers from across, the LinkedIn ecosystem will raise their hand and say, "Ooh, I like that. Here's my money. Sign me up. Let's become part of this." And it's been really, really interesting for us because I guess there's a number of dimensions here we're discussing. So one, of course, is we found that the quality of your practice partner actually has as much impact on your ability to grow, succeed, and develop as the exercise itself. That came up consistently, especially early on when people weren't paying and we were just kind of grabbing anybody with a pulse to come join. If you got paired with a crummy practice partner, that week was pretty much shot. Didn't matter what you did. It's really hard to really lean into the experience when your art partner is just sitting there with their arms crossed, bored, like, this is lame. Why are we doing this? So that's been an interesting finding for us, that being in a community of people who are all hungry to improve, who are all willing to help each other improve, who are willing to accept feedback from others, who are willing to kind of experience that naked feeling of trying something new and being bad at it and making a fool of yourself with a stranger. Being in a community of those like-minded folks is honestly, I don't know if it's as powerful as the practice, but it's a powerful contributor to developing, right? Because you're just receiving these really strong signals of this is the way to act, this is the way to be, this is the focus to have. And we've had folks improving in areas that we didn't even practice as a result of just having that mindset of self-improvement, that mindset of getting better on every call, that mindset of trying new things, even if it's uncomfortable. People are getting better. And we're like, great, we didn't teach you that, but great. I'm glad being in this community is having that effect. And folks have talked about how, there was even one guy who said he was considering leaving sales because he just didn't like the profession. And being in this community of people all focused on improvement, all focused on honing their craft, all focused on the art of human communication and influence in its purest form, rather than just being focused on the next commission check, was really refreshing and kind of reawakened his passion for sales. So the power of the community and the people that are in there actually surprised us just how impactful that was. We thought it was just a matter of create good exercises and that's all that matters. But it's like, no, creating that environment and that culture of people actually has a huge impact on people's performance and how impactful the practice is too.
Yeah. Sales can be a really crummy industry if you're in the wrong company or with the wrong team. I've been in a couple of companies where the person at the cubicle across from you wouldn't even acknowledge your existence all day because, like, you're not the one paying my paychecks. You're not the one I'm getting paid to talk to. So all I said was, "How was your weekend, bro?" Like, just chill. How do you get people out of the awkwardness of role play? That's always been my biggest struggle with sales training, whether I'm running it or doing it, is having people kind of not break character, not kind of make a joke out of it, and kind of laugh the awkwardness away and just actually be in it.
Yeah. Part of that is kind of the selection piece on the front end. We actually have people apply to be part of our cohort, and in the application, we ask them about how do you feel about trying new things, stumbling, making mistakes, and looking like a fool in front of people. And folks who are like, yeah, that's not okay with me, we just say, hey, you're not going to like this program, spend your money elsewhere. We're folks who say, yes, that's the best way to learn, I'm hungry for that. Those are the folks who let in. So part of it's just the selection on the front end, right? There definitely is a significant chunk of the population who would not benefit from being on our program because those barriers of the uncomfortableness and the awkwardness and the unwillingness to lean into the discomfort and the closed offishness, it would ruin their practice experience and it would ruin other people's practice experience. So for some people, we just truly aren't a fit. Like, there's just going to be mental barriers that get in the way, and that is what it is. I would say, though, for the majority of people, they're somewhere in the middle. Like, they have parts of themselves they could tap into and lean into that are a little more hungry for development, that would be willing to get uncomfortable. And they have parts of themselves that are a little bit more standoffish and would say no thanks. So we see it as our job in onboarding folks into this cohort to really send strong signals to them of what kind of place this is and what side of themselves they should bring to the table. Because again, most people have the capacity to act in either way, and it's truly authentic to them. So we got to send signals. We literally have a like a kickoff call that we do before the sessions start, the practice sessions start, and I can't even describe how much thought and planning goes into those kickoff calls. We have read a lot of different books on how to build cultures, how to send signals to people. And literally, like, every element in this hour-long session is carefully calibrated to be checking at least one, typically two different boxes for sending signals, right? Sending signals of, you belong here and we're a group of similar-minded people and you fit in here. Sending signals of we share a future together, right? Our outcomes are somehow interlaced together. Sharing signals of vulnerability, mistake making isn't just okay here. That's literally the purpose of being here. This is the place you come to make those mistakes so that you don't make them on real calls. Sending those signals to people, right? Giving people guidance around how to give and receive good feedback is one of the first things we cover, and we explain how it's the most important part of this program. Again, everyone in the program, as part of the application process, has sent us a video where they talk about why they're excited and why it's going to be helpful for them to receive feedback, to make mistakes, and to feel like a fool, right? That video partially is for us to kind of weed out who's not going to be a good fit, but a big part of that video is signaling to their brain what kind of space this is and what part of themselves they should bring to the table. Because again, from the moment they apply, they're tapping into whatever beliefs live inside them already that believe making mistakes is a good thing. And they're verbalizing that and sharing that. And again, that's a really strong signal of what part of themselves to bring to the table here. So the onboarding is really important. And then honestly, as we go through the program, we just consistently keep reinforcing that, where every week we're actually giving people specific guidance on what kind of feedback their partner should be giving them and explaining why it's going to be really helpful to them to get that feedback from their partner. So I think those are probably what have helped us the most. It's just that consistent messaging, right? And we even remind people, literally, as in one of our first labs, we'll call that out. We'll actually say, by the way, we've all been in breakout rooms where we just like got chit chatty and talked the whole time away and didn't actually practice. We can't actually stop you for doing that, but the opportunities to practice in this industry are incredibly rare. This is one of the only chances you are going to get this week, this month, to actually practice something before taking out a customer call. So the very best use of your time today is to actually spend it in practice. And surprisingly enough, when we bounce around from breakout room to breakout room, we find very little chit-chatting, right? Probably 80-90% of the time when we hop in a breakout room, people are actively engaged in the practice. So it's part of it is filtering on the front end, part of it is sending those really strong signals up front. And then again, the other piece is just the reinforcement of constantly talking about it.
One of the things I really like about what I've seen from your business so far was following both you and your co-founder on LinkedIn, and seeing the kind of stuff that you guys are putting out. You guys take a very I don't want to say left wing like politically, but kind of in the more personality type way of kind of being more empathetic and just good people, and marketing yourselves as decent people that like to help other people, where I see a lot of the industry being very much the opposite. It's a lot of Gary Vee and Grant Cardone, like, fuck everybody else. If you're not selling, you're not winning. This very like almost toxic masculinity style of salesmanship, where like one of the most beneficial books I've ever read to my selling was called The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. It's a terrible fucking book. If you actually use that book in all of its entirety, you will be a terrible person who is just manipulating everyone around them and never forming actually real human connections ever. But it's good advice if that's what you're looking for. Sometimes sales is manipulation, but a lot of times it's really just empathy and connection building and getting your client to trust you and want to do business with you. And I see that a lot from your company, and I like that approach a lot more.
Yeah, both myself and Jordana aren't necessarily in love with sales. We're more in love with the human mind, communication, influence, persuasion, how to have impact on people, right? How to form, build relationships, how, this intricate puzzle and game of how minor decisions that we make about how we present ourselves can have major impact on other people's perception and feeling of safety and et cetera. We have the mantra that we live by, that the most powerful selling skills are the most powerful human skills. And we've often given the advice that a good kind of litmus test for your sales training is ask yourself, would I feel comfortable using this technique or behavior in a conversation outside of sales, right? With someone at a grocery store, or with a friend or a family member or a colleague that you work with. Would you feel comfortable using that? And if it would feel wrong and icky and weird to use it outside of selling, don't use it in selling either, right? We both very much are focused on, I guess, the pure forms of human communication, right? And how to have impact and how to have influence, such as listening, right? Like literally the skill of listening and how you listen and how you convey your listening has a huge impact on the speaker. And that is a skill that we practice in the practice lab, but people consistently tell us they use that skill in their outside of work relationships as well. We focus on curiosity. Again, curiosity is just a innate human ability, and it is a powerful skill to focus on that can lead to better conversations, and yes, can lead to better selling. We focus on how you ask questions, right, in a way that really sparks thought in your partner's mind without triggering defensiveness. And again, that's really powerful for selling when you're asking your prospect about, hey, what impact would this have on your business? Or what difficulties have you been facing? Some of those questions are hard to ask. So using these particular behaviors to word the questions in a way that doesn't cause alarm or offense or defensiveness, it's really impactful. But guess what? It's the same damn thing when you're talking to a friend of yours about something sensitive, right? You can use the same behavior to ask difficult questions about their health or their marriage or their, childhood upbringing or whatever it is that's slightly taboo. You can use the same behavior. So yes, I'm glad to hear that you've perceived that from the outside, because that's very much that we believe. Like in our mind, true sales, pure sales is like the noblest profession there is, right? To be truly good at this type of selling, you have to be the most curious, the most empathetic, right? You need to be the best at managing your own emotions. You need to be the best at reading the emotions of others. You need to be the best at making people feel good, right? All of these skills, which again could make you a great teacher or a great counselor or a great coach or a great parent, are the exact same skills that make you a good seller. And truthfully, that's why I've stayed in sales. So, like many folks, David, I never planned to get in sales. I didn't want to get in sales. When I got in sales, I wanted to get the hell out of sales. But the only thing that's kept me tied to this profession is that I'm finding that in order to become really good at sales, I have to become more like the person I want to be, anyways. Right? I want to be that person who's a great communicator, great persuader, great listener. I want to be that person who can have difficult conversations. I want to be that person who can motivate others to take action. I want to be that person. And again, when you're focusing on the pure craft and art of salesmanship, you have to become that person. And
Yeah.
again, it spills over into every other aspect of your life too.
Yeah, you see the kind of trope, especially in movies, but in real life as well, of like, the guy that like got too good at business and, put too much into his business and his entire family and everything falls apart and he's a terrible husband and a terrible dad and all of this. What I see when I go online and in my circles is people saying things like, I became a better salesman and then I became a better father and a better husband and a better everything. My friendships are better. Like when you actually become a better person and learn these skills that you're talking about, you're right. They're so actionable in your outside world. Like I promise you, your spouse cares even more about how you're listening to them than your prospective clients do. Like if you can't listen to your spouse talk to you, you're not going to have a great marriage. If they don't
Yeah.
feel heard, you're screwed.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much carryover. Almost perfect overlap, right? If you picture a Venn diagram of like, skills in sales and skills in life, it's like a 99% overlap. There's very little that I do in selling that I can't bring into my life, and there's very little in my life that I can't bring into my selling.
Yeah.
And that's again
Dealing
what's
with
always felt
gatekeepers,
good for
that's
me.
not something you have to do too much in real life.
I'm sure there's probably a parallel there you can find. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, let's think about this, right? If you're dealing with a gatekeeper, you have to use empathy to think about what is their life like and what is their job like, and you got to use empathy to think about how is their day going. Then you've got to use your, emotional intelligence to think about what can I do to make them feel good, right? And then you've got to use a certain amount of character and integrity to be straightforward and honest with this gatekeeper about your intentions. Then you got to use a certain amount of creativity to think about how to get their attention. So I would say even gatekeepers, you're falling back on the fundamental human skills of empathy and curiosity, and asking good questions and being creative, even though if there's not a direct parallel.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I am even more excited about the Practice Lab than I was before this episode. Tell people how to find you, how to find Practice Lab, how to sign up. Both the link to your website and the the Wheel of Objections are both in the description. But tell people
Perfect.
how to find you.
Yeah, so the website is thepracticelab.co, not .com, .co. That's where you can find the link to apply for our next cohort. That's going to be starting in January of 2023. The link that David referenced is also on our website, but it's also in the show notes. That is for an event called Wheel of Objections, where we actually took our objection handling lab that we'd only ever done internally inside the community, and we made it available to the public. So you can just roll in there. It's a free event, and you can learn about a new way to handle objections that, kind of as we were just talking about, really aligns with meeting people's basic human needs. Trust me, this is a pattern that once you learn it in the context of sales, you will absolutely use this when you're having disagreements and hard conversations with other folks in your life. But you'll learn this approach to objection handling, and then you'll get a chance to do multiple practice rounds with a partner. We call it Wheel of Objections because we have this cool software program, or even just like a website with a widget on it, where you spin a wheel, kind of like, I don't know, Jeopardy or something, or just not Jeopardy. Whatever the game is with this spinning wheel. I'll kick myself for not remembering it now. But anyways, Wheel of Objections, great opportunity to try out a practice-based approach to skill development, get to know us and our approach. And then of course, if you like it, you can, go to our website and apply. So those are the two places to go: the website, the Wheel of Objections event. That happens like the third Wednesday of every month. So there's one coming up in a few weeks in October, but we'll also do them in November and December as well.
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on. This was awesome. I hope to see you in the Wheel of Objections in a couple weeks.
All right. See you then, man.
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already done so, like, follow, subscribe, and then click on those 2 links in the description. Go sign up for the practice lab. If you are in sales or do selling, this is an awesome opportunity. And I hope to see you also at the Wheel of Objections later on in the month. But until then, keep up the fight.
Shut up and sit down.